Welcome back to another episode of Live, Lead, Legacy, the podcast where we explore the stories, the experiences, and defining moments that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm your host, Carlos Luna, founder of LunaLink. One of my favorite things about this podcast is that we get to go beyond the job titles, beyond the company logos. We get to discover the person behind the success. We get to understand the challenges they face, the lessons they learned, and certainly the impact that they're trying to make on the world around them. Today's guest is someone I've really enjoyed getting to know over the last number of months, Mr. Akhil Sachdev, the founder and CEO of Docura Health, an artificial intelligence company focused on helping insurance and healthcare organizations work smarter, reduce administrative burdens, and improve outcomes through practical AI solutions. What's fascinated me most about Akhil isn't his technology, it's his journey. He grew up in one of the most competitive academic environments in the country. He navigated the pressure of achievement culture, challenged traditional definitions of success, and ultimately walked away from the path that many people spend their entire lives pursuing. Today, he's building something with purpose. And I think his story is going to resonate with just about every entrepreneur out there, certainly with insurance and healthcare leaders, with students, and anyone who's ever questioned whether they're chasing what truly matters. Akhil, welcome to the Live, Lead, Legacy Podcast this morning.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's been a long time coming, Akhil. And before we talk about Docura and AI, insurance and workers' compensation, I'd love for the audience to get to know the person behind the company. The podcast is called Live, Lead, Legacy. And because I believe every leader's story begins long before their professional success, I'd love to be able to rewind the clock a little bit on your journey. Take us back to Northern California where you grew up. What was life like for young Akhil?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Bay Area suburb called San Ramon, California, and I was always surrounded by technology from a very young age. Everyone I knew, my parents, my friends' parents, were all working in some kind of role in tech. It was something I was always exposed to. I actually initially wanted to be a doctor, and I had dissected a frog and I saw blood splatter, and that was the end of my medical career.
That's a very visual picture that you're painting for us there.
I mean, there were a few other ones, but that one really stuck out to me.
You just didn't have the heart to examine Kermit the Frog's innards, it sounds like.
No, I did not. And I also was interested at some point. I think another thing about being in the Bay Area is you're always surrounded by tech entrepreneurship specifically. And I always wanted to do own my own business, start a company. And you see people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and you're always hearing about these stories. And it was definitely something I wanted to do. So initially I wanted to do business, but then I also realized in order to have the skills to do that, I wanted to do computer science. So that kind of drew me to studying computer science and programming and software engineering. I think growing up, you're always, everyone is trying to one-up each other. Everyone's trying to get to do the same things you're trying to do. It's a constant, the main conversation people have is like, oh, what are your grades? What did you get on this school test? What did you get on the SAT? What did you get on the ACT? Your entire self-worth ends up becoming just those grades and scores.
That's very interesting, Akhil. You know, the fact that you talk about just living in an environment where pressure exists so vividly and so constantly. In your opinion, would you say that pressure helped propel you forward as you look back on those times from elementary school all the way up through high school? I imagine that pressure helped to shape who you are today as a leader, as an entrepreneur. But how would you say it impacted you, and how did that play a role in developing who you are today?
I think it definitely had its pros and cons. I think the pros are that, in general, you're forced to become a very competitive person. And I always was very competitive in general. I hate losing in general. But I think when it came to this, I was competitive about getting the best grades I could get, doing as much as I could do, getting into the best schools that I could get into. So it definitely helped me build that competitive edge that's required. I think that one thing that was not so good about it is that like you think that success only happens in one way. There's like a specific path that you need to take all the time. These scores are going to determine like your entire like self-worth and your future. And if you don't do this like exactly how it is, you're not going to like be successful. And that I've come to realize is just completely false.
Very fascinating to me. You know, as we had been prepping for this conversation today, one thing that you shared with me about your high school journey, and it, quite frankly, it takes a lot of courage to talk about, is the fact that growing up, you were bullied because of your weight. So many people carry those experiences with them for themselves, right? And what impact do you feel that very vivid and perhaps even traumatizing experience for you, how did it impact, again, who you are today, your work ethic, and ultimately how you shaped your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always a little overweight. I think pretty much through most of my K through 12 education, I was bullied for it. I think one of the things that I always used to feel was I never found any worth blaming other people for how I'm feeling. I would always blame myself for why am I feeling this way. And the only thing that I realized could actually solve this problem was to take action. I didn't think there was complaining about it or like telling someone that like I'm getting bullied or I'm like they're calling me this isn't going to solve the core problem, which is that I was fat. And before going to college, I decided upon to take accountability on it. And I spent the entire summer starting to actually go on more runs. I was starting from 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile, 5 mile, 6 mile runs. And then I would start going to the gym and all of that was around like 5 to 6 times a week. And I started eating cleaner as a result as well, which helped me reduce 30 pounds before going to college. And I was in a much better shape, and working out and doing exercise and being physically active is still something I care about to this day. And it just taught me that it doesn't really matter the current situation, but if you put in if you put in work over time, then it compounds into like a really visual transformation. Like you might not see it on day 1, but you will see it on day 90, or you'll see it on day 180 or like year 1 that, okay, this really made a difference in a lot of different aspects of my life. And initially you're also thinking about, are you doing it for other people? Like initially you feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it because I'm going to prove so and so wrong. But ultimately what you realize is like, I'm doing it for me and I feel like way better now. And it doesn't really matter what those people are going to say.
Very fascinating, Akhil. There's a lot to unpack there in what you just talked about. One thing that really stands out to me, though, is your mindset throughout this, right? I do think that there is accountability for the individuals that obviously put you through this experience, right? To the individuals that felt they had the right to bully you or felt like they had the higher ground to bully you. I think that's a terrible mindset. But what's even more fascinating to me and maybe even more impactful overall was the mindset that you just described. And that is, there is a problem that I'm navigating right now, and that is the problem of my weight, my health, and no one else is going to change that except for me. And you took ownership of that. Right? You really felt like the only person that can fix that was you. And not only did you think through it, but you actually did something about it and you acted on it. You had a glow up. Today, you're like glow up Akhil, right? You're like, it's funny. I don't know if you ever watch cartoons, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but SpongeBob SquarePants, right? His buddy Squidward. There's a version called Handsome Squidward, and he's got like the chiseled jaw. You're kind of like Handsome Squidward now. You're a big deal. I love it. But man, I got to tell you, that mindset of understanding that you have a situation that only you can change is so powerful, because you ultimately are the one who has the most to gain or the most to lose, right? From that mindset. I think that's such an incredibly important lesson, because what I'm hearing really isn't a story about weight loss. It's not about the glow up, even though I joke. I like terrible jokes. My daughters don't laugh at my jokes, right? Because I'm their dad. But this is really a story about learning that difficult things become possible when you're willing to consistently work at them, right? And that's a lesson that clearly shows up later in your entrepreneurial journey. So as you think through just the resilience that experience taught you, I'm sure that you can see some parallels now in your entrepreneurial journey. So you get through high school, you get in shape, you get these amazing muscles, you get the handsome Squidward look. You eventually make your way to Berkeley, which is amazing, right? And something else that we talked about really that resonated with me was that you described a moment where you didn't perform at the level that you expected to academically. And at the time, I'm sure you were devastated. I'm sure that you felt like, holy cow, what am I going to do now? But then something interesting happened. You realized that life continued. Tell us about that moment.
So this was like my first year in Berkeley. I had done this midterm for this one class and I flopped it basically. And I was really down on myself for, I'd say like a day. Then I kind of just woke up the next day and realized like life just moves on. It's just a midterm, and that midterm isn't going to determine whether you're going to get a good job, whether you're going to like be successful. You can always like bounce back, again, figure out like what went wrong regarding that specifically, and even realize that like there's a lot more to just doing like the thing one way. Like success can happen in many different ways, and everyone's path is different to that.
I think every leader eventually learns this lesson, right? That when you're going through failure, it certainly feels permanent. It certainly feels like all things are going to end, right? It feels very, very heavy. And then what you just described, Akhil, you wake up the next morning and you realize, gosh, the sun is still coming up, right? And the world didn't end. Now you have a choice to go about your business, to go about how would you respond to this failure, which is an incredibly important theme to talk about. Another thing that I find very fascinating in your story, Akhil, is really your perspective on prestige, right? Growing up in Silicon Valley culture, there are certain milestones that everyone is taught to chase, as you spoke about earlier, the elite school, the elite internship, the elite company, right? The elite title. You earn many of those opportunities, and yet your experience wasn't what you expected, right? Walk us through your mindset in that. What did you feel emotionally once you finally get the prestige that you were taught to chase? And once you obtain it, it really wasn't everything you thought it was going to be. Walk us through your mindset there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most things, like even when you look at it from the outside, there's always like a shiny object syndrome, like, oh, if I get this, my life is like set. But that's never really the reality. When it came to prestige, like even when you're in high school, you're thinking about getting into the best school, like Berkeley. Like when I got into Berkeley, at the moment, obviously you're happy and you're celebrating and stuff like that. But there's still like an entire like 18 to 70 years of life that's left, right? So there's still so much. And when it came to like getting like an internship at one of these prestigious companies, it's definitely like, again, same type of thing where outside looking in, you're like, oh my God, this would look so good on my resume to everyone else. And when you would do it, I interned at one of these prestigious companies. And what I realized was like, I was doing work that wasn't really making an impact on anyone outside of the company. You would be building like an internal tool for some manager to use. And you realize that like your work is literally not doing anything. There isn't any soul to the work. It's just a lot of, we do the same things every day for the next like however long you're there. And I never wanted my work to feel like that. For me, I just started to realize there that working at one of these bigger companies wasn't all it seemed. I think it has more of a value for people outside who look at you and they say that like, oh, you worked at one of these prestigious companies. You must be really smart. But that's also really not the case because a lot of times you can be smart, but you can also be lucky. So there's that element of it as well.
Let me ask you this question, and I just want to clarify. I want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. What you just described is you went to work or you went to an internship with the very prestigious, probably a brand that we all know very, very well, a tech brand. You were working on these projects, but you felt like even though you felt busy, there was still a disconnect from impact. You felt like the work that you were doing really, at the end of the day, didn't matter. Am I understanding that correctly, Akhil?
Yeah, I mean, it was like busy work that didn't really like it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things because you're not actually impacting people with your work. And also when you're at a big company, you're like such a small part of the pie that it's really hard to have the same impact as you would if you were working at either a smaller company or doing your own company.
Well, that's a very powerful observation, in my opinion, because I think that many people spend years chasing a destination, right, without really ever asking whether arriving to this destination will actually make them happy. And it sounds like you've experienced this, right? You obtained all the things, again, that you were taught to obtain and to value. And once you got there, you're scratching your head thinking, I thought this was going to feel a little bit different, right? I thought that this was going to be a little bit different. At some point, in my opinion, something shifted inside of you, which is great. And you began looking less at the prestige, right? Less at the standards that maybe were set before you as young Akhil. And you started looking more at purpose. Less validation, more at what is truly going to make a difference in this world. So when did entrepreneurship first enter the picture for you?
It was something that I think I mentioned. It was always sort of in the back of my head, but again, I never really like took that action because I was also just so at the time oriented around let's get a good job, shiny object syndrome, just like the most prestigious job. And I had a return offer at another one of these companies that got rescinded because of a bad job market, which was out of my control. And it was around the time that these models, these LLMs started coming into the picture. So I started playing around with these tools and I'd actually started building a bunch of projects. And one of them became a company that I tried to start that ultimately failed. But at the same time, it made me realize that you can really build things and if you put your mind to it. And the other thing was also that like, even through that experience, I also learned so much about just how to make products, get it to people, what to not do, and how things work. It actually ended up helping me get my first job out of college, ironically. I think one of the things that I really learned from that experience was that product was in the recruiting industry. And I just realized that by the end, I didn't know if I felt like recruiting was the best use of my time for the next 3, 4, 5 years. I was always interested in healthcare. So I decided to take a job at this other startup that was specifically focused on AI and healthcare. And they had a suite of products. Overall, it was a really, really cool experience where I would actually go on site to some of these clinics and help them integrate AI into their practices through things like ambient scribe. And as a result, I got to actually work directly face to face with physicians and being on the front lines. I think that role was very impactful for me because it actually showed that the things you can make impact like important sectors of society, like healthcare, versus the scale of what I was thinking before. When you're out of college, you only think about things that are like directly your problems. Sure. And student problems in the grand scheme of things aren't really like real problems. The biggest problem that students have is, can I meet my friends more often? And that's not really like a real problem. I've always gravitated towards solving things that actually impact real everyday people.
I love it, Akhil. You know, you said something very casually that I think is very profound, and I just want to make sure that our listeners caught it. You talked about how before you landed on healthcare, before you landed on AI, you had an experience where you worked in a different sector, doing something different. And it sounds like you tried to launch a different company that didn't really turn out the way that you wanted it to turn out, right? Instead of letting that experience make you bitter, you let that experience make you better. My son was a wrestler, a collegiate wrestler, and one of the lessons that I always tried to instill in him was that you never lose, even though it seems like you lose a duel against your opponent. You either win that duel or it's an opportunity for you to learn, right, from that duel that potentially you think you just lost. So you have the opportunity to win or to learn. And it sounds like you found that lesson out on your own as well, right, where you had these experiences that really taught you a lot of rich concepts about how to deliver products, about how to deliver services to certain sectors. And I got to applaud you for that. So I didn't want our listeners to miss out on that. There are countless of industries out there, Akhil, that I think you could innovate today, truly, quite honestly. I feel like you've got the skills that could really help a lot of different people. And you talk about healthcare being an important sector of society, right? Because you're helping people. Is that primarily the biggest reason why you feel like you landed on healthcare and using your AI skill set to help innovate that sector? Am I verbalizing that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest reason I wanted to continue innovating in healthcare is just because as I have been learning more about it, one as a patient and then one as someone who's building AI solutions for healthcare, it's just broken, frankly. Like there's so many things that are so fragmented and the incentives are off across so many different parts of it. I really think there's an opportunity to consolidate a lot of that. And ultimately the impact of building in healthcare and actually making the system better is you help everyone get better care. I think one of the things that I feel is that the US healthcare system, it's really the costs that make it inaccessible for everyone. I think the main things around it are just like, it's really about the costs, because I think the actual care a lot of times is still relatively good compared to other countries, even though they might have free healthcare and the free healthcare might come with a lot of wait time. But over here, it might be more costly, but at least you can get the access that you need. And I think that if that cost was reduced, more people would get access to higher quality care.
Well, that's a very, very important question, I think, that should be answered by society. Let me add a layer to this. So we talked about the reasoning for you selecting healthcare. What about AI? What made you go in that direction? And what problem did you feel passionate about solving? I know you talk about fragmentation in healthcare, which is a great way to describe it, Akhil. And I think the same can be said, about workers' compensation claims. You've got so many different stakeholders involved throughout the medical care and claim operation continuum that's very fragmented, and there's information coming from a dozen places, right? A lot of information. Was that the problem that you felt passionate about solving? Share with us what your mindset is in terms of the problem. What were you trying to solve when you decided to focus on AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think with AI, it was just one of those things where it had always been something that I'd been interested in. There were like so many different applications that were coming out at the time. I guess the ones that are most obvious, you see like, there's self-driving cars, or like and I think when LLMs came out, it was a big breakthrough and everyone started using it. It changed the way everyone was operating in schools, at their jobs. It's still continuing to change the way they work. I definitely felt like it was an opportunity for a lot of the way like work is being done to change. I think one of the things that I felt also was like a lot of these tools that were made for people before in the pre-AI era were just these like abstract dashboard type tools that were supposed to kind of be like one size fits all. Doesn't really solve the problem. It solves like 70% of the problem, but then creates like an extra like 30% of pain for these people. And you realize that there's an opportunity to make a change there, because AI, the whole goal of AI is that it's personalized to you and to the role and to the industry. So that drew me towards going deeper into AI.
Akhil, for those who may not be familiar with Docura, would you spend a moment telling us what the company does? And again, the problem that you're trying to solve specifically in insurance and workers' compensation.
Yeah. So Docura Health, we automate medical record review, assist with report templating, and basically automate a lot of the grunt work around independent medical evaluations or qualified medical evaluations in California. So we've built AI tools and agents that collect histories, review records, template reports, and verify these reports against other information like records, cover letters, and stuff like that, so that providers can spend more time writing higher quality reports rather than doing all this other grunt work around the reports. And then for claims, we also give them the ability to get a clearer picture of how much money should they allocate for a claim, by like how much should they set their reserves at, and what is the timeline and the sequence of events. Ultimately, what I believe is that we want to connect these two different things and create a system where these cases can move along faster, since a lot of the work that's being done of taking these documents and extrapolating information of it is just being done so many times repeatedly over different stakeholders. And we want to consolidate this because we believe it only really needs to be done really only once to truly get a picture of the case and settle it faster.
Thank you for that explanation, Akhil. Artificial intelligence is all over, right? Everybody is talking about it. I think that at every conference that we go to, we can expect at least 2 or 3 breakout sessions, right, dedicated to artificial intelligence. Some people are excited about AI. Other people are very nervous. Some people feel overwhelmed with AI and the thought about AI becoming proliferated within the insurance and workers' compensation / healthcare industries. But one thing that people may be getting wrong about AI is that it is not an autonomous tool, right? Meaning human power is still necessary to optimize AI. And I wonder, Akhil, when you think about the work that you're doing right now at Docura, and as you look at the rest of us lay people who are not as technology aligned as you are, what would you say we might be getting wrong about AI? Is there something we're missing? Like, is there something that you would say to yourself, man, guys, you're missing the boat here. Like, this is truly what AI has to offer. Or, guys, you're focusing totally on the wrong thing. Or are we getting it right? I mean, what are your thoughts?
There's definitely a lot of quote unquote like no-brainer applications where it's like, oh, can you upload like 1 page of documents or a couple pages of documents and get like a small summary? That's like, okay, that gives you some picture, right? But I think the next step with AI is really like, we can use AI to take the information and actually take actions, which is what agents are for. I think there's definitely like a little bit of friction when it comes to actually taking the action, because it definitely changes the way people work, because rather than just doing one part of it, you're actually like doing like multiple steps. So I think that's the next step for AI. And that's where, at least that's where our company is going, to be able to take different actions and being able to tailor it by the specific things that a company might need, or like how they administer claims, or how the specific doctor like assesses their IMEs and QMEs and stuff like that. There's a lot of like, yes, please automate the grunt work. But there's also there's understandably hesitation towards more things involving like clinical judgment, because that's more sensitive. And obviously if that gets wrong, then that has a very bad downstream impact on the case of the rest of the process. Building AI to understand that type of more complex reasoning is also going to be a really big step. And I think it's worth starting to build towards that, because ultimately that's where things are going, and it will make the system as a whole more efficient.
Akhil, a lot of people would say, AI is really struggling right now with the rudimentary questions, right? We've heard numerous times about AI being utilized in a legal setting where it creates hallucinations, or perhaps provides attorneys with inaccurate case references. And so there's been a lot of hesitancy to really trust AI with the quality of output. I want to ask you, as a developer of an AI solution, what excites you most about where AI is heading over the next 5 years or so? You talk about, developing AI to understand more complex tasks. Is that what excites you more about the potential of AI, or is there something else that we, again, who don't live in this space on a day-to-day basis, have not yet seen?
I think the big thing is like it's like obviously doing one task and then taking the steps to the next task. It's also based off of the way the systems are built itself. There are different types of models, like you have larger companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, and you have like open source models where you can customize more. Over time, you're going to see like maybe like a model like OpenAI and Anthropic out of the box might not work for your firm, your company, like your practice, but like a solution that's tailored using some kind of open source model that's customized to you and continuously learns and gets better based off of how your company operates, or your firm, your practice, your firm works. That's going to be something that's, I think, is going to be really big, and the ability to take the steps and actions. And I think understanding, like building some kind of memory of like implicit knowledge, like someone who does their job operates. I think the best way AI is used today is like you're basically taking the knowledge of someone who's been doing this for like 20 years, like someone who's been a claims adjuster for 20 years, someone who's been an IME or QME for 20 years, and you give them the access because they can steer AI in the right direction better than like someone who doesn't have any experience doing it can.
So building a company, in my opinion, and in my experience, Akhil, really teaches lessons that no classroom ever can. And I'm sure that you've experienced that as well in your journey. What's been one of the hardest leadership lessons that you had to learn since founding Docura?
And I feel like there's like so many. I'm like, it's like hard to like pinpoint like one lesson right now. I mean, there's obviously like the basic stuff where it's like, oh yeah, you're going to be get told like no 100 times, which is like that's like what you're signing up for. So like when you start a company and you still have to keep going when everyone is telling you no and everyone's telling you, oh, this thing that you're doing is just like not going to work. If you actually truly believe in it and you believe in yourself, you're going to keep going anyways. And then in terms of other tidbits about other lessons I'd say I've learned is like there's stuff on like for context, before this I never really did like sales properly, so that was a big learning for me, understanding your customer and how to interact with them. We sell to doctors and TPAs and insurance companies, and both those profiles are very different. Sales. Selling to a doctor is more about you're talking about different things. You're reaching out to them in a different way because they don't have the online presence of someone like maybe someone on the insurance side who has more online presence.
And when you say online presence, you're talking about just being tech savvy, right? Just knowing their way around technology. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Like being just being like on on LinkedIn or like having like a website or like phone number that like works. And so there's that, like there's just like that element to it. I would say, okay, I don't know if this is one I should say, but I'm going to say it anyways, but like it's more on just operating the company, where it's like I think that sometimes you have to spend more to make more. And I think one of the things that I realized is like you can either grow really slowly, profitably, but in this age, like you kind of have to move fast. So you have to be willing to take more risks and more bets on different things and different channels. So you have to be willing to burn a little bit more in order to grow faster, in order to basically put your foothold in, because everyone is coming after that same spot that you are.
Akhil, I think that's a really important and powerful lesson that you talk about there, because the reality is that in the world of business, right, you're either growing or you're dying. There is a loss of client and revenue base just due to the sheer competitiveness of the sector that we work in. So your thought process around investment, around spending money to make money is actually right on. Right. And I think that there are some entrepreneurs out there that might have the mindset of, I need to save my way to a profit, when in fact, scaling their company is going to require some form of investment, right? So that they can open the doors to additional opportunities. So I think your thoughts on that are spot on. And it's a really, really important lesson for all entrepreneurs to think about. So if you have a young entrepreneur out there that's watching this or listening to this episode right now, Akhil, someone who is where you were 5 or 10 years ago, maybe they're in their handsome Squidward stage right now, and they're looking for that glow up. What advice would you give to that young person?
I'll say one thing that I wish I would have done a little bit more earlier. I think that I started doing this like obviously like towards the end of college, but I probably wish I should have done this in the beginning of college. Was like just try to be open to talk to people, like strangers, a little bit in a weird way, because like I think one of the things that I would when I started Docura was just going to clinics and with boxes of muffins and donuts to try to actually like get my name out there. And even for other ideas that didn't work, I would do the same thing. And I would do that to get conversations and understand what people do. You really never know where those connections lead, honestly. But that was one thing that I do currently still. And I think that if I was younger, I would have just told myself, just do it now. I think the other one is like, don't listen to advice. I sometimes feel like deep down, I think you know what's best for you. Like what worked for someone else might not work for you. They're probably at a different stage. They're thinking about like probably have just a different perspective of what that version of themselves was. But sometimes when you listen to too much advice, you don't know, you get to this analysis paralysis stage.
What I'm hearing you say is follow your instincts, right? Like you have a gut feeling, trust that gut feeling, trust yourself. I love that. Is there any resources out there, Akhil, that you absolutely love? Is there a podcast besides Live, Lead, Legacy that you totally dial into on a regular basis? A virtual mentor or maybe even a real life mentor that you spend a lot of time with?
I think one of the books that really played a role for me in actually even also going down the entrepreneurship path was The Alchemist. I don't know if you've read that book. But basically the premise is this guy is a shepherd in like south of Spain, and he has this dream of going to Egypt to see the pyramids, and he ends up embarking on this journey. And ultimately when he reaches I don't know if I want to spoil it, but basically when he reaches the pyramids, he realizes that basically when he was there, he just got like, it just wasn't what it was, and he got mugged, but he got a lot of other things along the way. Like he found his partner, he got so many different skills along the way that he built. And one of the things, and this was ironically when I was listening to the audiobook when I was commuting to my job. And one of the things that was said was like, this guy, he could always become a shepherd again if he wanted to, regardless of whether the journey that to reach the pyramids works or not. And for me, it was like kind of in the same things. Like I felt like I could always go back to like, I felt like my worst case scenario was I could go back and become a software engineer. And that was my worst case. So it kind of made it clear to me that like, it almost was like a no brainer. Like, hey, I might as well take a shot, because the worst case is I get a higher paying job than I have right now. So
I love it.
That was a big player for me. And then in terms of a mentor, like, so when I was starting Docura, I was a part of this incubator called Solo Founders Program, and the guy who runs it, Julian, was really, really impactful in helping me think through my company, and also helped me connect with people who have actually executed in sales. And you would see successful companies. I think that the thing about San Francisco and the Bay Area is that like, if you're in the company scene, you see like what has worked for people, and that it's possible to really have like a outsized outcome, and like the skills that it takes. It's hard, but it's like possible, right? And what you think is good, that perspective changes when you come to a city like San Francisco, where everyone is just constantly thinking about ways to improve the way they're operating.
I love it. I love that type of environment when you surround yourself with people that, are like-minded, right? They have similar goals, and that energy just helps to energize each other, right? You energize someone else as they energize you, which is really exciting. Akhil, the final part of every Live, Lead, Legacy episode is what I call the legacy segment. And this is really where we move beyond careers and beyond businesses, right? It sounds like Docura is on a fast track for growth, which is really exciting. And just based on hearing your philosophy on business, I couldn't imagine a team being in better hands than in your hands as founder and CEO. But because at the end of the day, most people won't remember who or what our quarterly results are, I want to make sure that we underscore the true important thing, right? What is the impact that we want our lives to have? And that ultimately is going to be what is remembered by people, right? What was the impact that we made? Not how much money we made, but how did we make them feel, right? So when people hear the name Akhil Sachdev 20 years from now, what do you hope they say about you?
I hope they say that like whatever work I do, I really wanted to just impact like everyday people, and I want to solve problems that not just like the top 1% face, but like the rest of the world faces too. And when people hear me, they should say, "Oh, that's the guy that really like just turned this system around," or like turned some really like like old antiquated way that was not benefiting people, that was actually causing like problems for people's lives, actually saying through what he made or through what we've built, my life was a lot better than it would have been if it was not there. And I think in general, the work and the things that I want to work on, I want to just impact everyday people's lives.
I love it. Very, very well said. So before we wrap up, I want to do something a little fun with you. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. But I'm going to set a ground rule for you. You can't think too much about it. So this is what we call the rapid fire question round. Okay. Enter the horns here, the and fun graphic here. Now, okay, here we go. So you can only use one word or very short answers, okay, to respond to these questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Favorite book?
Alchemist.
Most influential mentor? Nobody?
Probably. I'd say
myself? You're like myself.
No.
You're like Snoop Dogg. I think myself.
I mean, probably probably Julian, I guess.
Okay.
I guess that's kind of, yeah.
Favorite sports team?
The Warriors.
Okay, fair enough. Nobody's perfect. Morning routine must have. You do this every morning and you can't skip it.
Cup of black coffee.
There you go. And biggest misconception about artificial intelligence?
It's not going to take everyone's job. It's going to make everyone's job easier.
Love it. Great answer. Last question. This has to be a good one. One habit that every leader should develop.
Do I have to give one word, or should I say like?
No, short answer. You can say a short answer.
So every night before I go to bed, I list out my tasks and what I want to accomplish the next day. So when I wake up, I have a list of what needs to get done, and I don't have to scramble thinking the next day like, oh, I need to, what do I have to do today? I already know what needs to be accomplished for the next day, so I can just get started.
I love it. You know what's funny is I do the same thing the night before. Every evening, I take a look at my Outlook, what I have going on, and then I take a look inside, what do I need to get done? I take a look at my deliverables, and that way when I get into the office the next day, I hit the ground running. Great advice, Akhil. This has been an outstanding conversation, my friend. I really appreciate you taking the time. And what I appreciate most about your story is that it challenges the idea that success is all about checking boxes and that the path to success is linear, it's straight. You learn firsthand that prestige doesn't automatically create fulfillment. In fact, you learn that failure isn't permanent, right? In some cases, failure may actually prop you up, as you mentioned earlier. It'll teach you valuable lessons. You also learn that discipline compounds positive outcomes and that meaningful impact will always outlast external validation from others, right? And I think those are lessons that, quite frankly, every leader can benefit from hearing. So really appreciate you joining us today and for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone listening. Really appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to subscribe, share it with your network, or share it with someone that you feel could be inspired by the conversation today. And don't forget to leave us a review. Until next time, remember, leadership isn't measured by titles. It's measured by impact. Live intentionally, lead courageously, and leave a legacy that matters. I'm Carlos Luna, and this has been Live, Lead, Legacy.